Hi guys, I'm Diane, and today I want to talk about The Truth of the Aleke by Moses Ose Utomi. This is the second book in the Forever Desert series, which began with The Lies of the Ajungo. However, this story takes place 500 years after that one did. So in The Truth of the Aleke, we follow our main character, Ose, who lives in the City of Truth. And in the beginning, we learn the history of this place as Ose knows it, which varies a little bit from the story that we saw in the first book. As Ose knows the world, the City of Truth is the last remaining free city within the Forever Desert, and they for centuries have been attacked and attempted invasions from this cult of Tutu. And the leader of that cult is the Aleke. So as Ose knows it, this cult is trying to take over his city as the last city for them to take over, and for many years they have been fighting against it, defending their walls from this cult. Ose is a junior peacekeeper when we meet him. He is hoping to rise in the ranks of this group of people that protect their city. And early into the story, we see one of these attacks, and Ose steps up in an act of bravery and gets wrapped up into this whole battle between the City of Truth and the Cult of Tutu. He is sent out eventually to train and face these people, and that is where he learns his truth. So the basic premise of this story, if you read the first book, feels very similar. We follow a teenage boy who lives in an isolated city within this desert, and they think that they know the way of the world, the way things work, the way their city is run, and for different reasons they are sent out into the desert to face some enemy. And while they are out there on their own journey, they learn some truth about the world, about the way things actually are, and eventually return to their city with that truth. However, the details between these stories make them feel very different. Tutu and Ose are very different characters. Tutu is a bit younger than Ose, and his whole motivation is saving his mother. He begins the story with his mother dying of not having enough water, and he sets out in a desperate attempt to find water so he can save her, and ends up finding unexpected friends along the way, learning the truth about the world and about his city, and then returning with that truth to do what he believes is right. However, Ose's motivation is very different. It's very selfish. He wants to be a hero, not so much to save anyone, but for the glory of it. He wants to rise in the ranks so that he can be recognized for his bravery, his actions. But because he's so selfishly motivated, he tends to be blinded to the intentions of the people around him as he goes through the world and learns the truth about things and who these people are that they're actually up against, a little bit more about the people running his city as well. He is learning a lot of information that could be very valuable, but he tends to be blinded to the intentions behind those motivations, behind what people tell him. He doesn't read any more into it. He doesn't really try to. And as a result, he learns that there are truths on both sides and reasons for both sides to be doing what they're doing, but he's never really sure who his allies are and who his enemies are, because he's never really looking at the bigger picture. So for a few reasons, I didn't really like Ose at the beginning of this story. I definitely grew to feel more sympathetic to him. Part of that was knowing the history of the world as it happened from following along with Tutu's story versus what Ose knew, and that's really not Ose's fault. It's true in the real world also that history is changed just a little bit over time. This is 500 years later. Of course, the story is going to have changed a bit. That's really not Ose's fault. But it was difficult to see his feelings about the world and about Tutu and the events that happened so long ago, knowing a slightly different version of events than he did. And the other thing was just that he is so selfishly motivated. He's looking for the truth of the world, and ultimately he does want to do good, but the driving force behind that isn't very likable for me. I just felt bad for him and his way of interpreting the world and what he does with the information he's given. There are conversations throughout it. He's playing a game with one of the other characters, and it is pointed out that he is so focused on his role in the game and how he can win that he's not really paying attention to what the other players are doing and what the game could potentially change, and he never wins the game because of that. He's too focused on himself and how he can succeed that he doesn't take the time to think ahead at what could change, what someone else might do that will affect things that are happening. And I think that's very interesting that it's all explained to him and he still doesn't really see what's going on around him. He doesn't see the bigger picture. That being said, a lot of the side characters within this, everyone outside of Ose, is a lot more complex than in the first book. There's a lot more nuance in what people are saying or doing. The divide between good and evil in the first book is pretty clear cut. We know who the friends of Tutu are, and we eventually know who the actual enemy is. And in this book, it's not so clear. Both sides have their reasons and their motivations for doing what they're doing. Both sides are telling some truths, but they're also telling some lies, or at least telling a truth in a way that benefits them, that uses Ose in their advantage. And Ose is really stuck between these two sides. Once he learns more about what's going on, once he learns the truth of the history of this place, as this history has been rewritten over time, as the leaders of this world have changed, we get more action in this. There are attacks and fighting, but there's also a bit more magic and a bit more exploration of the world as we see two different cities. Moving away from that good versus evil from the first book, where things are pretty clean cut. In this one, they're a little bit less clear who's good and who's bad. I was even questioning, is the truth that I thought I knew even what really happened? So I think this was a really cool addition to this world. I ultimately ended up really liking Ose's story and seeing him struggle through the world in a way that Tutu didn't quite as much. I did become very invested in Ose and uncovering what was really going on and what was going to happen. And I am very much looking forward to seeing where this series goes next and how this world is going to develop. I'm not sure if the third and final book is going to follow another character or if we're going to continue on from where we left off in this one, but I'm definitely excited to see that. I think this is a really cool world, and I think the stories that we're getting from it are very interesting and very engaging. And I also think it'd be really interesting to read the story without having read the first book, to not have that slight bias against Ose and this history that he knows going into it, and really learn about the world alongside him rather than kind of waiting for him to figure out that things aren't exactly the way he was taught. But whichever book you start with, I definitely recommend reading this. I think it's very well written, very engaging story, very interesting place to explore. So let me know if you've read this or you're planning to pick up this series. Otherwise, that's all for me today. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.